Hello and welcome to the Magic Mirror Podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Khan, the Trinket Mage, and with me is my co-host, 33 Elk.
Hello.
That was a very middle hello.
Yeah, I'm trying to mix it up.
Now that we're not doing tier list slop content, Elk's a bit more energized.
No, I just got this orange soda. It's awesome.
That'll also do it.
And with me is my other co-host, Salubrious Snail.
Hello.
All right, today we got a couple of different topics we want to touch on. We're going to talk about the updates to the Commander ban list and Game Changers list. We're going to talk a little bit about complexity in EDH, and then we're going to try and go through a couple of questions because we missed some from the previous episodes. So we'll try to get to multiple questions in this podcast.
We're going to do a tier list of your questions and see which ones are the best.
Yeah, we'll give each one a rating.
You gotta.
But before we do all of that, I need to tell you about today's sponsor, Card Castle. It's the easy way to sort your collection digitally. You can start scanning and sorting your cards for free today. But if you use our link in the description, you'll get 1 free month of premium access. Thanks to Card Castle for sponsoring the podcast. Also, before we start the podcast properly, I do want to plug my second channel. I think by the time this podcast is out, the first video should be up. If you haven't seen it, I'll put a card to it here and maybe a link in the description. Should we talk about the changes?
Let's do it.
Yeah, we got unbans. We have 5 whole unbans. Gifts Ungiven, which is 3 and a blue for an instant. Search your library for 4 cards with different names. Reveal them. Target opponent chooses 2 of those cards. Put the chosen cards in your graveyard. Rest in your hand. Then shuffle. Sway of the Stars, which resets the game basically. Shuffles all permanents, hand, graveyard into library. Draw 7 cards. Each player's life total becomes 7. That's a 10 mana card. 8 blue. Braids Cabal minion. 2 black for a 2/2. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices an artifact, creature, or land. Coalition Victory. 3 white, blue, black, red, green. Sorcery. You win the game if you control a land of each basic land type and a creature of each color. And Panoptic Mirror. 5 colorless for an artifact. You can imprint X and tap to exile a card from your hand with mana value X. At the beginning of your upkeep, you copy that instant or sorcery that you exiled.
So I don't know about you guys. I was really only surprised by one of these because I think several of them are just, cards that probably aren't going to see a whole lot of play if they're available, or cards where there is something very clearly better than them. So, Coalition Victory is good, but it's not better than, most combos. Sway of the Stars is, obviously a card that negates a bunch of gameplay, but it's not going to be like rampaging through the format if it's unbanned.
Yeah. I think there's an obvious power outlier here, but it's still not like format warping that outlier.
Yeah. So Braids is the one that surprised me because I think Braids is genuinely kind of disgusting in the command zone, but it kind of seemed like that was their reasoning why Braids was okay to unban, was because it is a card that it's only going to be disgusting if it's in the command zone, and you can see that before the game, which I hadn't thought of, but it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I really don't mind Braids really at all anymore. I was originally paused about like any Braids unbanned because Jeweled Lotus was still around, and I feel like that's the most degenerate thing you can do with Braids, because like nowadays you have to go Dark Ritual, Lotus Petal Braids, like there's another card involved somewhere in that play.
And then what do you do from there? Like what, you sacrifice your land on your upkeep?
I think a turn 2 or 3 Braids is still pretty good. Like you throw down like a Bitter Blossom, you throw down some other source of
Braids is great with Mazarek. It's great with Mayhem Devil, right? Anything that cares about like sacrifice triggers. Like it's actually like a tangibly good card. I'm not calling Braids bad by any regard. I'm just saying like without Jeweled Lotus, the whole Braids turn 1 and then everyone doesn't have lands forever is like the joke, right? But yeah, no, Braids is not really that problematic at all, really, especially without Jeweled Lotus. And in fact, I think it's rather cool.
Well, so I think, still the play pattern with Braids that will be problematic is if you rush it out with fast mana. If you, land some sort of engine, or not even an engine, just even if you have like a card that makes a treasure when it enters, you have 2 things to sacrifice, and then you land like a turn 3 Braids or turn 2 Braids, something along these lines. Immediately, other decks, if they don't have meaningful plays below X amount of mana, they're going to be in some big trouble. And, some decks will not care at all. There'll be some decks that can shit out a bunch of permanents, get a bunch of tokens.
Yeah, okay, Rod Hot Boy, we get it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put my turn 2 mana dork into play, and if you make me sack one of my lands, I explode the deck.
For sure, yes. And I've definitely played against some very fast rollout decks that cause that deck some problems. But I think broadly, unless you're playing a version of EDH where everybody is kind of agreed on the fact that decks are going to be mostly 1 to 3 mana permanents by volume, which is certainly a decent portion of the EDH format, but not universally agreed upon. The card still can make Timmy over there in the corner not be able to play the game.
I do agree that Braids is powerful. I think it'd be silly to say that she's not. I feel like if your deck has no fast mana in it, even if Braids is in the command zone, it's still good, but I think most decks should be able to handle that. I think that's legitimately fine.
At that point, you should just be rocking Turgid, honestly.
Right, or honestly, Tiny Bones is kind of a crazy card if you build around him. Tiny Bones Trinket Thief, that is a very powerful card. Again, yeah, I feel like Braids is very fine as a card. With fast mana, it can be a high power commander, good bracket 4 commander. Without fast mana, I think it's a solid bracket 3 card.
Yeah, if you're landing this on turn 4, you're not causing problems for anybody.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's it's totally fine in that context.
Yeah, maybe I'm just slightly skewed because I'm Selesnya pilled, but for me, I'm oh great, I have to sacrifice my Birds of Paradise or Luminarch Aspirant. Who cares?
What proportion of your decks are 1 to 3 mana permanents by volume?
I do not think I have a deck with a curve that does not average to 2 mana value.
Jesus.
Braids is really bad for players like me who play a lot of low creature decks.
Yeah.
So I actually have to sacrifice lands or mana rocks. The card that I actually am surprised was unbanned to me is Sway of the Stars. I think that this is the weird one. So in my everything else Coalition Victory, if you want to there's 100 better ways to win the game, that's fine. Panoptic Mirrors silly, there's better ways to win the game. Like a Snail said, if there's stronger things already in the format and it's a power thing, then just unban it. Sway of the Stars is weird, right? Because it's hard to take advantage of.
This is only natural after the Worldfire unban, I feel. And there's now tangible mechanics that can be played that take advantage of Sway the Stars and what it's doing. So you could plot a bunch of cards, right? I'm thinking of Count on Luck, or no, Make Your Own Luck as a card is a sorcery. You draw 3 and then you plot a card, and then you can Sway the Stars later and then cast that plotted card. Or you can float a huge load of mana and have a sort of a upheaval turn where you float a ton of mana, Sway the Stars, and then also cast your commander, or also cast the new spells you get. I don't know. I feel like there is some play with this card.
So my argument against that is
so
the difference between this and Worldfire is Worldfire is a lot easier to build around. If you just have Zergo Bellstriker or Ragavan in the command zone, you can essentially build a Worldfire deck and just kill people with Zergo Bellstriker, and it's pretty fast. 7 life is a little bit trickier to actually get to damage wise. And then additionally, with the mana cost being 10 mana, yes, you can float mana, but then at that point, you have 20 mana, 30? How much mana are you floating such that you can actually make use of this? It feels like a card that genuinely resets the game in a way that I think is difficult to take advantage of. And it is more likely that you are going to, even if you attempt to build around it, I'm going to make 50 mana and then Sway of the Stars, it is more likely that you're going to need to panic use it before you actually assemble your 50 mana combo and do the thing. And it's going to be a massive time sink.
Yeah, I could see the panic use option for sure.
So the Stars is one of those cards where I feel like the reason you unban it is because you want fewer cards banned in the format. I think the number of people who are going to be using this is going to be exceptionally small. Actually, I'm going to look up how many people use Worldfire. I'm guessing it's just going to be a lot of fucking Theorycraft and then stop looking at it. What's his name decks? Infamous Cruel Claw. 2,000 people threw together an Infamous Cruel Claw Worldfire deck. How many people have that in paper, really?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. There's 10,000 Worldfire decks on EDH Rec. It's not a lot, But and you can see Norin or Ragavan is one of the most popular commanders for it, or Zozu the Punisher. There's ways to take advantage of it. I think it's just a lot harder with Sway of the Stars. And if you want to do wheel things, there's already wheel stuff in the format. Sway of the Stars being on the ban list doesn't stop you from doing any type of deck. you know?
For sure. Yeah, I don't think it has much value being banned. I also don't think it has much value being unbanned. I think it's just, they're trying to figure out what's on the list that shouldn't be on the list. Because, yeah, I can't imagine a whole lot of very interesting positive play patterns with Sway of the Stars. It's kind of just going to reset a lot of gameplay, but it's probably not going to see a whole lot of play either, especially if it's on the Game Changers list.
Yeah, like, are you really spending a game changer on this? Like, I don't know. I agree. It's like the likelihood that it actually is annoying in one game that I actually play is like low. But then at the same time, it's like, I don't know, why are we unbanning it then?
Yeah, I should interpret it as them trying to simplify the ban list. If something doesn't need to be on there, don't put it on there, I guess, is what the thought is. And yeah, it's not taking it off isn't going to have a huge impact.
Do you guys have anything else to say about the banned cards, or do you want to move on to the bracket changes real quick?
Yeah, I mean, all the other unbanned cards, like the best one is obviously Gifts Ungiven.
Yeah, that card is really strong.
Panoptic Mirror is not bad. And I feel like most people aren't actually going to do the broken Panoptic Mirror infinite turn ordeal. They're probably going to do some silly stuff with it. So unironically, Panoptic Mirror, good unbanned.
I want to play it in Tawanos because with Tawanos Urza's Apprentice, I can copy the trigger, which is kind of funny.
In my mind, I could see Panoptic Mirror coming off of the Game Changer list very soon.
Same.
Too. Just because like we already have like no chaining turns bracket 3. And so it's like you're automatically in bracket 4 jail if you decide to use Panoptic Mirror in that way. So yeah, I mean, like it's not going to remain on the Game Changer list for long, is my estimation.
I think so as well.
Great. Yeah, we can talk about the brackets
Yeah.
update then.
So they decided no actual changes to the brackets, but the Game Changers list is going to be updated.
Yes. There's also 2 removals from the Game Changer list.
Yes. So 2 things being removed: Trouble in Pairs and Trinisphere. Trinisphere, I totally agree with. I think this card is silly as a game changer. Like, it literally doesn't matter whether or not it's on the list. It doesn't do anything against casual decks, really. And I don't know. I didn't see why it was on the list.
The more broken Magic you're playing, the better Trinisphere is. And the more casual Magic you're playing,
yeah,
the
it's
worse
only
it
good
is.
at like brackets 4 and 5, in which case it doesn't matter if it's a game changer. So
Exactly. And Trouble in Pairs always stood out, of course, as like the weird sort of, like, it's a good card draw engine. It's going to draw you a few cards per turn rotation of the table, but like it's 4 mana. It's like, it's really asking a lot from you to get that card advantage, and you don't get it right away like you would with a One Ring or what have you.
I'm more or less fine with Trouble in Pairs being off the Game Changer list. I think it being on there is okay, but I think it coming off is fine. What interested me was that Gavin Verhey in his video said that the reason it was coming off was because it draws a similar number of cards to other cards that aren't on the Game Changers list, with one of the examples being given being Skull Clamp, which I found funny because Skull Clamp seems like a very obvious card that should be on the Game Changers list.
Skull Clamp mogs Trouble in Pairs. I'm like, you draw so many more cards off the clamp than you do pairs. Honestly, though, I don't know if Skull Clamp belongs on the Game Changer list. It's a broken card. It's really strong, right? But you need a sacrifice outlet, or you need to be like puking 1/1 creatures into play in order for it to actually achieve that Game Changer potential, which I feel pigeonholes it at least slightly in a deck. Like, I'm not tempted at all to put Skull Clamp in all my decks, but I am tempted to put Rhystic Study in all my blue decks, right? Like, Skull Clamp has a place where it is broken, and putting it in just any deck, you're not getting the return on your investment. So
but you can put Trouble in Pairs in any deck.
Trouble in Pairs you put in any like white deck, yeah, it would be just fine.
The reason I say Skull Clamp should be on the Game Changers list definitely is because if you look at the decks that it's in, a very high percentage of the time, this is an extremely desirable card for the deck. This is like their number 1 draw, their best card, the card they want every game, their first tutor target in so many decks.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's broken in the decks that get to play it, but my argument is that you just don't really see it in a lot of decks, because it needs to be in a specific home, which is specifically like 1/1 tokens and whatnot. And when a Skull Clamp hits the board, of course, the token player's drawing, 4-6 cards. That's incredibly strong. But to me, I don't know if I've ever seen like a Skull Clamp guarantee someone a win like I have like a Rhystic Study.
I feel like it almost certainly has.
I don't know. Maybe I just play at tables that know how to like beat people to death when they start drawing enough cards to be a threat. Generally speaking, it has like a bit of a Soul Ring kick me effect, where it's like, I put Soul Ring on the board. Okay, I'm going to get blown up now.
For sure. Yeah. It's definitely not a universal card, although not even all the cards on the Game Changers list are.
That's what I was going to say, is like, I feel like the additions has made me more confused as to what a game changer even is. So real quickly, I'm just going to list off all the ones that were added. So Teferi's Protection, Humility, Narset Parter of Veils, Intuition, Consecrated Sphinx, Necropotence, Orcish Bowmasters, Notion Thief, Deflecting Swat, Gamble, Worldly Tutor, Crop Rotation, Seaborn Muse, Natural Order, Food Chain, Aura Shards, Field of the Dead, and Mishra's Workshop all got added as game changers. And I feel like many of these don't make sense.
I strongly disagree. I very much like basically all the additions to the Game Changers list.
I think they fall into a few different categories. Do you want to pick some specifics that you disagree with, Con?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, so the first one I want to talk about is Consecrated Sphinx. We're not adding Skull Clamp. We're removing Trouble in Pairs. Gavin specifically called out they're not adding cards like the Great Henge, other powerful card draw pieces, and then the 6 mana old one that's just on a dude is the one that gets added. I feel like Consecrated Sphinx is not nearly as powerful as anything else.
I agree that Consecrated Sphinx is like one of the 2 weakest additions to the Game Changers list. However, the fact that it's on a dude is actually the problem with this card, because you can't reanimate a Rhystic Study, you can a Sphinx, and you are basically drawing 6 times as many cards as anyone else at the table the second this hits the board.
So yes, you can reanimate it on turn 1, but I think the brackets already account for that. If you're playing a deck that's able to reanimate like a crazy thing like Jinka Taxes or Consecrated Sphinx on turn 1, where it would be like a devastating, insurmountable advantage, you're not bracket 3 by default, basically. And therefore the game changers don't matter.
I think Alec is talking more about the utility and versatility of the card more so than its like speed.
Oh, well then,
just like you can do more with a creature. You can
Yeah.
copy a creature, you can flicker a creature, you can reanimate a creature, etc.
I think it's important to highlight that yes, in bracket 3, Consecrated Sphinx meets its match really well. But that's kind of the point of the Game Changers list. I feel like if you put this into play across like 3 pre-con players, which is what bracket 2 is supposed to be, it's like kicking sand in their eyes. It's like they are not going to be able to surmount the card advantage you get. And like you pass the turn, you get at least 1 card draw. That player untaps, removes your Sphinx. That's still fine. The Sphinx replaced itself and drew out removal. Like it is a very good card that probably shouldn't be up against pre-cons, and that's why I'm happy to see it on the Game Changers list.
Here's my defense for the Sphinx. Compared to Skull Clamp, which is an artifact, which is also another crazy type that lets you do all sorts of shenanigans with, it is also 6 mana. And if I'm playing against precons and I cast my 6 mana 6/6 or 4/6 and I draw a couple of cards and then you remove it, I actually don't think that is like out of place. Like your 6 mana bombs should feel powerful.
I feel like it often draws a lot more than a couple of
cards. It does draw more than a couple
I have
cards.
described the worst case scenario, in which case it feels fine. The best case scenarios for Sphinx is you win.
Like comparing it to Skull Clamp, I think is kind of crazy.
I think they both should be on the Game Changers
I mean,
list.
yes, that is true that you agree that Skull Clamp should be on the Game Changers list. I think it's crazy for Elk to say the opposite, that Skull Clamp doesn't deserve it, then Sphinx does.
Well, we're not talking about Skull Clamp right now. We're talking about Sphinx.
But I'm talking about like, what does being a game changer mean? And like, Consecrated Sphinx does not stop your opponents from doing anything. It doesn't like end the game in like a sudden way. You actually do have time to untap and like respond to it. When compared to things like Narset Parter Veils, which is a game changer, like, yeah, you can't draw extra cards to try and find a way. Like, I know drawing to find removal for Consecrated Sphinx feels bad, but it is something you can still do. And like, yeah, they get a lot of cards and then you kind of, 3v1 their arch enemy or whatever. With Narset, you literally can't. The number of outs you have is like decreased.
Yeah, I mean, but like Rhystic Study doesn't stop your opponents from doing things either. Like I'm failing to see like the difference here.
Study's a 3
I know
drop.
Rhystic Study's better. I know Rhystic Study's better. Stop, don't comment that. Yeah, Rhystic Study doesn't stop you from doing things either. You can still draw into your stuff and cast your removal, and then like, yeah, but they're still coming out ahead of that interaction.
So here's the interesting thing.
I'm not comparing Sphinx to Rhystic Study, by the way. Of course, there's a power imbalance there, but I'm saying neither should be at like a bracket 2 table. I'm pretty in agreement with that choice.
I think the interesting thing is like, originally I felt like the game changers were either cards that severely shift the dynamic of the game such that your like answers to it are like very limited, tutors apparently, and then cards that create like bad play patterns. So Rhystic Study is a powerful card, doesn't actually stop you from doing anything, but it creates bad play patterns when you feel bad for doing things. And that's why it's on the list, right? Not purely power. And I think Consecrated Sphinx doesn't hit those same marks.
When
it draws a
Consecrated
gate-
Sphinx is on the board, I feel like I would rather skip my draw step than give you 2 cards, is how it feels. I hate drawing cards when it's in play.
it just really draws a really game warping number of cards is all there is to it. Like it, immediately the game becomes about the fact that this player has a Consecrated Sphinx on board.
Let's leave it to the comments to see if they think Consecrated Sphinx should be on the Game Changers list or not. I want to talk about a different one that I think is kind of odd.
Yeah,
that
go
they
for
added. The card is Deflecting Swat. So this is from the free spell cycle, where if you have your commander in play, it is free to cast. Actually, it's if you control a commander. So I guess if you steal someone's commander, you could cast it for free. And then it is a redirection spell. So Deflecting Swat is a powerful card. I am absolutely not denying that. It is in CDH, it's the red force of will. It's super good, super powerful. The thing that's kind of interesting about it is I don't know if it, I guess, does the other, when I'm looking at other things they added, like Humility, which I think has a very game warping effect. Does Deflecting Swat have like a legitimately game warping effect in such like a way? Like, I know it's good, but like,
I legitimately think you're from another planet if you don't think Deflecting Swat belongs on the Game Changers list.
But like, what's the
difference between this being on the Game Changers list and Force of Will and Fierce Guardianship being on the Game Changers list? Should those come off as well?
I don't think those should be on the Game Changers list.
Yeah, like, okay, listen, I slightly agree with you with Force of Will. Like, legitimately, exiling like a blue card from your hand is a cost, and it's tough. It's definitely the weakest of the free spells. However, I do feel that free spells create an unfun environment, which is the other half of the Game Changers list. Like, Game Changers don't have to just be strong cards. They can also create unfun play patterns. And a free spell does that. And in my opinion, the if you control a commander cycle from Ikoria are the epitome of, it's like a belly rub for doing something just like you were going to do anyway. Which is like the same thing that people criticize Landfall about being. And Deflecting Swat, without a doubt in my mind, is the strongest of them. It's better than Fierce Guardianship because it has the inherent ability to be card advantageous. Someone Swords to Plowshare is your commander. No, I'm going to take your spell and point it at your own commander now. Not only did you effectively counter your spell, but you got a removal spell out of it. And that actually like scales the lower in the brackets you go. Whereas Fierce Guardianship actually gets weaker the lower in the brackets you go.
Thoughts, Snail, before I talk about it?
I tend to agree. I think in part they're just doing this on rate. They're, free spells represent a very strong rate for something because it's literally free. So I think they're trying to add more of that to the Game Changers list just so that there's some cost to playing these in like a black bracket 3 deck. But yeah, I think Fierce Guardianship in particular is quite a strong card. A redirection spell has a ton of utility. And, the fact that you can, not even think about mana on your turn, pass the turn, and then as long as your commander is around, which it's a protection spell, you get to play this thing for free. That's pretty good.
I agree. I hate the cycle. I think the cycle is cringe and stupid. I would be fine if like all the cards disappeared. My problem with Deflecting Swat is I feel like it is like logically or philosophically inconsistent with the Game Changers. It makes it's weird to me. So yes, a free spell can be annoying. Like Snuff Out is a free spell that can be annoying. Oh, my opponent's tapped out. I'll cast my commander and go for the thing. Oh, they snuffed out me. It's a free spell. They only had to have Swamp in play. Like, oops, they got me. And it can be annoying. But does that mean Snuff Out needs to be like a game changer? Like sometimes things can get you, and that's kind of how like Magic works. There's some, would the game be better if there were no free spells or free interaction ever? I don't know, maybe.
Snuff Out isn't a 2-for-1 like Deflecting Swat.
Yeah, Deflecting Swat is better than Snuff Out, but like, because this isn't a power scaling, right? Game Changers aren't about power because like Craterhoof Behemoth is the most powerful green finisher or whatever. It's not on the list. This isn't like a power ranking. So yeah, it's a powerful card, but is it unfun? Is it game warping? I don't think it is.
100%, yeah. I think Deflecting Swat is super unfun. This card's nothing's worse than like, I have my interaction spell. I'm going to try to interact with you. No, you're interacting with yourself. That's like the worst feeling in the world. It's like, yeah, we sing the praises of removal all the time. And then of course, Deflecting Swat comes along and subverts that completely. I don't know. Like it's just an unfun play pattern. And I get Force of Will not being on the list or whatever, but I think this design is just so egregious and so unfun to see across the table. Even if it isn't like a game warping, like, ooh, because you Deflecting Swatted me, like there's a butterfly effect on the rest of the game. It still doesn't matter. Like this card's just unfun to see.
Would you say that about the green and white one as well?
Yeah, I don't like Flawless Maneuver a lot. The green one though is just a fog, legitimately. Like,
but doesn't that also feel bad? Like,
that one is,
oh, I tapped down your board, I swung out with everything, I was about to win, I was literally gonna win, and then Obscuring Haze.
Yeah, we also need to like stop bloat though, and it's if we're putting the cycle on the game changers list, it's only natural to put the best one on the cycle on the game changers list. If Fierce Guardianship's there, Deflecting Swat needs to be there. If neither of them are there, then that's fine too. But for the sake of consistency, yes, Deflecting Swat should be there with Force of Will and Fierce Guardianship as well.
We'll let the comments decide. I got one more that I wanted to talk about that I really thought was a bit of an odd include. And then we can move on to questions. That one is Crop Rotation. I feel like this one is a strange addition, especially because most of the best targets are also game changers. So if
that I do kind of agree
right,
with,
like if I want to crop rotate for Field of the Dead, that's 2 of my 3 game changers. That basically means that is gone in bracket 3. But then crop rotating for Bajuka Bog is also gone from bracket 2 now, which I think that's like a perfectly fine, healthy thing to do.
Yeah, Bajuka Bog is just one of the many cards you can get with this, though. This is really a build your own charm, and I agree. It's crop rotation is by far the weakest new game changer edition. This does not mean, however, that it should not be on the list. Like, yes, Field of the Dead, Glacial Chasm, and whatnot are game changer. Like, that's set in stone. However, crop rotation is still a build your own charm. You still have Talon Gates of Madara. That is not game changer. This turns crop rotation into 1 green phase out target creature, right? You can get, for instance, Depth Stage is still not game changer. You can still do that play pattern just fine. And legitimately, I do think crop rotation is one of the best green land tutors there is. And lands, we don't need to make lands any better than they already are. And I really do think that crop rotation, albeit it is the weakest addition to this list right now, I'm willing to let it ride and see how I feel about it versus just knee-jerk saying that this is a mistake. Because I have played with a lot of crop rotation. I've played a lot of legacy lands. And the fact that this is basically 1 green mana, do whatever you want it to because of Sajiri Step, Talon Gates of Madara, Bajuka Bog, what have you. I'm willing to see how it feels on the list before, just saying, no, this is wrong.
Yeah, this was definitely the card that I find the weakest edition, I guess you could say. I'm still not mad about it being here. I think it seems like Wizards of the Coast is trying to kind of complete the 1 mana tutor hate, just making it so that you can't tutor for 1 mana, basically, or at least it's going to cost you in some way. I'm also broadly fine with there being more cards on the Game Changers list in general. As Khan said, I think that the strongest targets of this card are already on the Game Changers list. The fact that it requires sacrificing a land also makes some of the weaker targets less notable, unless you're talking about kind of the mid game after there already are enough lands up for mana purposes. So this one definitely doesn't seem like too crazy a card to me personally, but I wanted a lot more stuff on the Game Changers list in general. And I think making a rule about, 1 mana tutors go on the Game Changers list seems fine enough.
So would you add Personal Tutor and Steel Shaper's Gift to the Game Changers list?
So that's where they're restricting the card type a lot more.
Personal Tutor's only sorceries, I should say for audio listeners. Personal Tutor is a sorcery, 1 blue. It only searches for sorceries, puts it on top of your deck. Steel Shaper's Gift is 1 white, adds an equipment to your hand, right?
Yeah, it tutors it directly to hand. It doesn't put it to top.
1 white, any equipment to hand.
Yeah, those target pretty specific types, which I think that it seems like we're still okay with. So those are a little bit more limited. I think once you expand out into instant or sorcery or creature or land, these are much more kind of broad types, I suppose. Land, I could see arguments that even, a land tutor is pretty narrow, but there are a lot of lands in this game and we're just going to keep getting more.
I don't know. Crop Rotation, it's a good card, but I think it's like a fun card that encourages like good play patterns and deck building and forward thinking. Whereas like Steel Shaper's Gift for Skull Clamp doesn't feel like that's a 0 game changer bracket 2 gameplay, but it is technically. So I don't know. It's just, I don't know. I feel as the list grows, the inconsistencies become more apparent and it's just very weird.
So Khan, we had a beef this week.
We did.
You made the video responding to a video I made last summer about, I think I named it something like the strange ethical case for playing boring decks. Basically, that video had 2 ideas to it. The first idea being that information overload is a meaningful problem in EDH. There are situations in which there's just too much stuff on board. There's too many things to remember. It puts excessive mental strain on people. And, the more complicated decks you play, the more this is going to happen. And then the second part was kind of, but complicated decks are a part of the format. So there are some things you can do to reduce this sort of overload, like, keeping revealed information revealed for longer, kind of announcing more powerful cards differently than, more mundane plays, like if there's a particular synergy piece and that sort of thing. So that was kind of the broad strokes of that video. And you had a video that, basically went through and debunked. Do you want to give a little summary of some of what was in that?
Yeah, I feel like I looked at those two broad points and agreed, but came to different conclusions in that, yes, the game is complicated, especially EDH is complicated. There is a lot of stuff on the board. It is very difficult to have a non-complicated EDH game, but close to impossible to have a non-complicated EDH game. And because of that, you should strive to just make the interesting, fun things that you enjoy and play. And by doing the things that you suggested in the video, like revealing information for longer or announcing plays and explaining things and just being patient and letting everyone know what is going on, you kind of alleviate that mental burden and should just continue to make your silly decks.
Yeah. So I know something I emphasized in kind of when I was, recording some of the bits with you and talking over some things. And, I think at a couple points I chimed in with statements. Something I wanted to emphasize was that complexity is very much a sliding scale. I think something I've seen both of you say at some point is that, EDH is already complicated, so who cares about adding more complexity? And that might be one of the places where the most meaningful disagreement exists. I'm not sure how you feel about that now, but I tend to be of the opinion that, although, weird decks are fun and it's cool to have, funky stuff around, I think it's still reasonable to, when building a deck, think about, okay, how overwhelming is this going to be? How much am I adding to the, slop that exists, the information slop that exists here?
Yeah, I genuinely think that if you are patient and forthcoming with your information, that it's not usually that big of a problem. I think complexity, for me, when I'm playing my decks, the time that is the most difficult is when I'm playing my Tawanos list, because usually that is a deck that has a very large number of permanents on the board. It has all these silly baubles and like random 1 and 0 mana artifacts, like a huge swath of them. So my board is just very cluttered because there's a lot of stuff on it. But I will always take the time to explain, I have this effect in play, and this one is the most relevant to my deck, to save my opponents the time of having to read all my cards and stuff like that. And I feel like as long as you know what your deck does and can express that well, I feel like, we're playing a complicated, difficult game. I don't think that by making a sort of more convoluted deck, I don't think it meaningfully makes it impossible or too difficult for your opponents to
I have
handle.
not watched Khan's video, by the way. I skipped to the parts where I appeared in like the little preview and I pressed play to see what was going on, and then I dipped out. But the big thing about complexity creep is I don't know if I can really think of a mechanic that's like too overbearing and awful that I get lost in the sauce. And I mean, I'm skewed too, like in terms of like I'm like up here in like the 5% of players that are at the end of the bell curve, right? So I'm very invested in Magic, so I know everything. But even then, playing with newer players, they kind of grasp what's going on. And I feel like that's twofold. One, syntax in Magic is very uniform. So all cards are worded the same despite how many different wacky mechanics there are. And that includes in reminder text as well. Typically, everything's going to be a triggered ability or what have you. And secondly, it's that a lot of mechanics are very parasitic. So they'll only really synergize with themselves, or at the very least, a newer player building a deck with that mechanic or someone playing that mechanic will likely only include cards with that mechanic. Insofar as saying a modular deck, they might splash into proliferate a little bit, but mostly all their creatures are going to be modular, and they're not really going to come out with another super weird sub theme that like completely muddies the waters, right? Like modular only really mainly works with modular and then has a couple side counter synergies, right? So I don't think there's like a real mechanic that causes this like burden of knowledge per se.
When I think about complexity, I don't necessarily think about, there being one deck that's just utterly overwhelming. Although that does happen from time to time if a deck, really cares about a bunch of specific permanents and their interlocking abilities, et cetera, particularly if it's a more powerful deck. I think what I am more concerned with is just that there are so many different things on board that individually require some thought, require some processing. I have to do threat assessment on, how will this player use this? How will this player use that? How will this player use this? So it's a bunch of things. And I think this was kind of demonstrated in a little activity that Khan had me do, where we went through and he gave me a commander and a card that was in the deck. And I, said why I thought it was there. Again, I look at the card, I think for like 15 seconds, I say a thing. That's not too hard. That's not generally the way it plays out in a commander game, because there are lots of other things to focus on. You're not playing this little game show with your friend. You're doing a game of Magic where you have a hand you're processing, you have, cards you're drawing, you have all sorts of things on the board that you need to threat assess. You might be trying to have a conversation on the side, who knows? And, you're having to do this for a whole bunch of cards all at the same time. And so what you see happen a lot at tables is that people just don't do that. They, see a permanent get played, don't bother to read it, and then either it causes problems or it doesn't. And that's the risk they take.
Once again, I feel like I really can't speak to the issue just because, like I said, I'm like really at the end of that bell curve. I make YouTube videos about Magic for a living, right? So I'm not really bamboozled by many things when it comes up in a game. In fact, I'll be playing with friends and they'll ask like a question, like a mechanics question. I'll be like, oh, it's because you have this card in your hand. And they're like, yes, it's because I have this card in my hand. So like, I really don't feel like it's my place to really step on this field then, so to speak.
I had a game actually just this past weekend where I played against some very new players. They were borrowing a deck. They're very new to Magic. They don't own any of their own cards. They just kind of learned from a friend. So I played the card Sylvan Safekeeper. And I explained what it does. I was that I can sacrifice my lands, I give a creature Shroud. And they asked what was Shroud. And then, I explained like, oh, it means nobody can target it, including me. And then they like ask a question like, why does that matter? And then, you can, say other things, to go along with that. And I felt like, I like explained what the card did, why it worked. And then they're like, oh, okay, I got it. And they, figured it out. I feel like sometimes we don't give new players enough credit, and that if you just take the time to be like, this is why the card does this, it like, they can figure it out. Players are smart.
Yeah. And I think part of the beauty of Magic too is that there's a lot of cards in the game and most of them are on the same syntax. And like I said, the same card wording is really unified, which really helps players really easily digest information just because everything kind of works the same way, even if it has a fresh new set coat of paint on it, right? A triggered ability is still a triggered ability, even if it's set mechanic, right? And that's like a main thing that frustrated me about Hearthstone. I actually have a screenshot of an opening hand somewhere where I have two cards that do the exact same thing, but they're worded completely differently. Like one is if it dies, and the other one is if this kills it. And it's like, is there a meaningful difference between those two? The answer is no. It's just they're inconsistently worded.
Yeah. Wait, Yusuf, do you want to chime in on the complexity of Magic as a new player?
Yeah, Yusuf.
What's up?
How do you feel about the complexity of Magic as someone who's relatively new to it?
Yeah, my parents taught me Magic when I was growing up, and so I've been familiar with the core rules for a long time, right? Play mana, play creatures. Green is my favorite color. It always has been. It always will be. And Commander is new to me, so I'm seeing a lot of brand new cards. I'm having to learn more complicated stuff like the stacks and the interaction of continuous effects and all of this, all this stuff, right? There's 4 players. And so I think there's a natural complexity to the game. And it's, fun to play a simpler deck. And I want to teach my wife how to play. And I think I'm going to build her like a more straightforward deck. But, you kind of have to, that's the game, right? And I like a complicated game. And I think there's a logic to Magic that helps with all of those rules. They kind of all come together very cohesively. But I think that's very much my opinion and not like an objective fact. Some people really find certain concepts very complicated and I can't speak for them.
Thank you, Yusuf.
Yeah, I think some people, I've met a ton of new players who are, super engaged, inquisitive, all of this stuff. And so it's definitely possible. I don't say anything to imply that it's impossible for a new player to kind of do well in a very high stimulation commander environment or kind of to imply that they are having a bad time. I think the biggest thing that motivated me to make the video originally was the experience of, playing in various public settings and experiencing the fact that it feels like a lot of players are, they'll have some or all of their games where they're just they seem a little bit checked out. They are just waiting for their turn again. They don't want to read opposing permanents. And I think sometimes this is just going to come down to the player. But I also think that there are other times where, if you're sitting at a table and you see, 700 words worth of text across opposing permanents that you need to read, you're going to be not super hyped for that in some cases for some players.
Yeah, I do say this with peace and love, everyone, but we have a Beseech the Mirror segment to get to.
Yeah,
that's fair.
I was thinking of that too.
Well, we can move on to that.
All right, we're moving on to the Beseech the Mirror section. We missed out on some questions before. We want to get to some here. I have already pulled up a few question. If you want to ask a question, just put mirror in your question and we'll get to it on the podcast. This question I think was kind of interesting. That Poser 444 asks, mirror, I sacrificed my firstborn zombie token to ask, how many sub themes is too many in an EDH deck? My Varina list has discard, token, reanimation themes, and I find it difficult to include all the zombie staples when I have all these packages.
My first question to you is, why'd you pick Varina as your commander? Does it support all the things that you want to do? Do you actually care about zombies, or does Varina just draw and discard cards? Look at the cards that you like the most in your deck, and then work from there backwards to find the commander. Don't start with the commander and be like, I'm locked into Varina for my reanimator pile. I guess I have to shove all the zombie staples in. Because I'm going to be honest, it sounds like you're not interested in the zombie staples, which is what zombies is all about. So maybe pivoting, trying to find a different home for all your cards. Maybe build Hashaton if you want to do a reanimator style deck. He's very good for that. But legitimately, to answer the question more properly, instead of just this anecdote, jam as many as you can fit until it stops working. It works. If there's too many sub themes and it still works, then it's fine. You have just as many sub themes as you need. I recently built a deck with Delirium, Lands, Big Mana, Eldrazi, and it works fine because I'm in Simic, so you can just do whatever you want. It really depends on the color combo and what's available. There's no single one-size-fits-all answer to that.
It's also going to depend on how well connected things are, because a lot of times when you have a deck with a bunch of sub-themes, you'll have these kind of centerpiece fulcrum cards where they bridge multiple themes. They synergize with multiple packages. They kind of escalate the synergies to even greater heights. So it really depends on how many of those sorts of cards you have, how well the initial kind of themes go together. I think, for example, there are a lot of times going to be whole families of synergies. In terms of counters, you're going to have all sorts of different stuff that works with counters, stuff that's vaguely connected, stuff that's less connected, all sorts of random keyword mechanics that are going to be having some sort of counter thing on them. So it just is going to depend on how connected your different packages are with each other, and also how compact everything is. Do you need a lot of deck space for your zombie theme? Well, usually if it's a zombie deck, the answer is yes, but some other decks might have a smaller core. So it really depends.
I think it depends on how many cards the packages are, because if it's a bunch of 3-card synergy packages and you have a lot of tutors, you can have a bunch of sub themes to do that. But I've found that once you get if you have a main theme and one sub theme and then another sub theme, your deck is really clunky by that point, and usually it kind of falls apart for me. I think a main idea and a sort of sub theme is very clean and elegant. Just have those two. As long as they synergize together, you probably will be fine. I try not to have more than that. I'm very guilty of building decks that have a lot of goofy themes mixed in them, and then they're very, very bad just because you don't find the pieces for it. You have too many that don't synergize with each other.
Next question.
Yes. What's funny is there was actually a couple about complexity creep, which I thought was really funny. Coincidental. Mick Boy asks, mirror, I'll swing into the other player if you answer my question. How do I stop my local politicking players from running away with games? Because they're better silver tongues than everyone else. And they also clarified, no, it's not small bean syndrome. They're just making deals and getting the better of other players.
Okay, Simic player, listen. Are you actually scary? Yes or no? If the answer is no, and this is coming from, this person's politicking and winning the game because of it, You just need to really appeal to reason. If this dude just drew like 20 cards, if he just tutored, you just got to be like, guys, listen, let's kill this guy. And you just run him over. Legitimately, politics is like one of my least favorite and most favorite parts of simultaneously. At one hand, it really adds to the casual atmosphere of things because I don't really take the game seriously. If you're in a king-making position and I lose because of that, I'm putting that as a win in the dome, right? But yeah, sometimes EDH is a popularity contest, and if you don't have that appeal, Godspeed. Enjoy your second place, good sir.
You can definitely, I would say, keep things light, but you can certainly kind of point to past games, point to history, or point to, oh, you're making that deal when you've got all of that stuff. All right, okay, I see what you're doing there. Just try to make people, call them out in a ribbing sort of way. Definitely don't go too hard on it, but try to make the state of the game clear to everybody at the table.
I think appeal to reason is just the best thing here. Is like, look, I know this seems like a good deal now, but he's going, this player is going to do that or going to do this, or they drew a bunch of cards. So like we need to focus up. I think that's the best thing to deal with politics. Reality
check.
Yeah, people aren't typically in the market of offering deals that are bad for them. Just like, yeah, my original game store had basically, it wasn't like the store had like a rule actually carved in stone or anything, but there was basically a rule of like no politicking. If you tried to politic, you're just getting your neck snapped. It did not matter. They're going to run you over. And so politics is a relatively recent addition to my Commander repertoire, just because my first like years in the format was in that really brutal area where like you need to have the answer because we're not making a deal. You're going to die or you're going to have the answer, which is fun in its own regard.
I got this question from Lumpy Bird. Oh, hi Bird. I think they're in all of our Discord servers.
Oh, yeah.
Mirror, I loop Shigeki, Colossal Sky Turtle, and reset to generate enough mana to ask, are there any cards, strategies you play more often than how much you like them would suggest? They give an example. Could be staples you have distaste for, or colors or strategies you dislike but challenge yourself to build.
I'm in Simic prison. Recently, I've been building nothing but Simic decks. It's horrible. I really like my most recent Simic deck. I'm gonna have a video on it soon. It's Clement the Worrywart. I am Mindslaver locking people with Emrakul the Promised End. And then the one before this, my second most recent deck is Kinesos Sea Monster Tempo, which is also Simic Sea Monsters. And legitimately, Simic's fun. I don't know what to say. It's really nice to have like 10 billion mana and all the lands in my deck in my hand and blue interaction. It's heat. I don't care if it's training wheels. I'm having a blast in the green kiddie pool right now.
There was a time where I built like Simic plus X control decks, and my goodness, it feels so unbelievably powerful when you have like 50 man, like 10 counter spells in hand, and I stopped building that. Right now I'm playing aggro. I'm on my aggro kick. I'm actually playing creatures and attacking, which creatures suck, but blue mage learns to turn creatures sideways, haha, but like, I don't know. I'm having fun. I think that's something I'm forcing myself.
I think for the most part, my decks represent what I enjoy. So, the cards you see often between multiple decks are going to be cards that I just like overall. And, most of my decks are black, which reflects that I like black a lot. For a while last year, I was in a green phase, and my friends were making fun of me because I just kept building green deck after green deck, just these stupid rampy piles of nonsense decks. Thankfully, I've escaped that, and Rada is the only remaining one of those decks that I still play with. But for a while, I had many green decks.
When you started with the format, Snail, were you like you were only on like mono black pile decks, weren't you? I remember you saying that.
I mean, I had my one mono black deck because I didn't play Commander as my primary format until 2019. So yeah, I had a mono black deck that I played as my Commander deck 2014 to 2018.
I think I find it very interesting because I really started out with aggro mono white. Like I think at one point I had like 4 mono white decks together, and now I have 1 still. But the thing is like I've moved from mono white now to mono white aggro to more controlling and interaction mid-rangey decks. And I find it really funny that Khan is now on an aggro kick and started from like blue control Dirtle Storm decks. I mean, I think it really just goes to show that like Magic has like a really big range, and if you stay in it for long enough, you're gonna go across the entire easel in terms of like every single color.
Yeah, for sure. I'm also in a little bit of an aggro phase right now, mainly just because I have my new aggro deck that I've been playing with. But yeah, I tend to oscillate back and forth between big stupid control decks and aggro decks.
My next challenge is going to be building an aggro deck without red, because with red it feels like, yeah, I'm playing Jessica, I'm tripling damage, I'm playing Bruce Tar, I'm giving double strike.
Build it without red or white, okay? Building an aggro white deck is not difficult either. You gotta really throw yourself in the deep end.
There's a few Orzhov commanders I want to try out. Maybe I'll try also no white at some point.
White is so good at aggro. It's really easy.
Mono blue.
Green-black aggro.
Green-black aggro would be sick. Build a rock commander deck. That would be sick.
Mono blue aggro is the real challenge.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. Mirror, mirror on the pod. What creature types would you love to see more support or given a more solid identity? This is from our ranking creatures tier list video.
I talked about it in that podcast, and I'm going to talk about it again now. Biblically accurate angels in Magic the Gathering would be fucking sick.
That would be cool. That would be cool.
Bring us to Xerex, Wizards of the Coast. Give us some cool, weird eyeball multi-winged angels, please. Besides, that answer, of course, I'm really excited for a return to Lorwyn. I hope they stick with the creature type theming that the original Lorwyn block had. I'm excited to see more Kiskin and Giants. Giants is a really good one as well, because I feel like Kaldheim really did a lot to make me like Giants in the way that they feel. Like Quakebringer, I think, is the one.
Yeah, that one's good.
It's in your graveyard and it shoots everyone every so often if you control a Giant. I think that's really sick. And there's Calamity Bearer that makes all Giants do like double damage. Like, oh man, I'm kind of in on Giants now that you mention it, Snail.
Yeah, no, Giants are great. I want to see more done with Spirits. Maybe I just want to see a more full commit version of Spirits where they go for some funky mechanic. I guess
Soul Shift.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, Kamigawa original was an example of going all in on Spirits in a very funky way.
We also got Disturb in Midnight.
That was a good version, although that felt like the backside was typically a Spirit, but the front side was not. So it was kind of, it's an interesting way to do Spirits. And it would be kind of fun to see more of that.
Yeah, I like the Vow ones where they are Spirits on the front, but on the back they're auras that like haunt something. That's kind of sweet. I like the Vow Spirits a lot.
That's fair. Yeah.
I think pre-Bloomburrow, my answer would have been Lizards, because I love lizards. That's my favorite creature type IRL. But I think they actually got a solid identity and a lot of cool cards. And Gev is like a cool commander. So I think I want to say crabs. I feel like there's like two legendary crabs and they both are kind of mid and they don't have a cohesive identity, but I wish they did, because you could, like, much like zombies or whatever, you could put crabs on every plane. And if they had like a cohesive identity or like a thing that they did that's iconic, you could like supplement with like draft chaff, uncommon crabs, and actually like build out what they do, which would be, I think, easy for them to do. And like, it'd be fun. It's a silly type. Crabs are cool.
I definitely like crabs as mill. Like that's just coming completely off of Hedron Crab, Ruin Crab, but I do in fact enjoy those two fellas.
Them some good fellas.
But yeah, also as a sea monster player, please do not give Wizards of the Coast more sea monsters that aren't octopuses, krakens, leviathans, and serpents to go into, because I want those for my sea monster deck. And if we get more crabs, the sea is going to be too overpopulated with those useless things that Thassa doesn't enjoy, and not enough of the things that I can flip off Kinesos. It's already bad enough that whales can't be flipped off Kinesos. I don't know what Thassa has against whales.
That is upsetting.
But like, if I ever work at Wizards of the Coast, my first task is convincing everyone to errata whale to Leviathan.